Okay, so for second to last talk for this morning, we have Héctor Villarreal Ortega, who's a Odoo technical consultant at ForgeFlow, member of the OCA since 2017, and PSC in purchase and reporting. And he's going to talk about EDI Framework, managing data exchanges in a single place. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thank you for being here. Today we're going to talk about the EDI Framework, which is a tool that lands the OCA ecosystem on version 14, and it helps to manage the exchanges, the inbound and outbound exchanges. On the agenda, we're going to introduce the tool, talk about actions and states, the framework concepts, the models, the available features that we have now in version 18 and in previous version as well, and what is coming soon. So in the ERP ecosystem, many times we need to exchange information with another parties, and we have a lot of process formats to exchange that information, also protocols that we can use to transfer these exchanges. So the motivation and origin for the EDI project was to avoid to be replying or repeating every time you need to do a new development, the same tools that you need to develop to send and receive information. Also, unifying the UI, the user interface, allow the developer to focus only the data in the configuration, so it's easier for the developer develop small pieces of a complex project. And no matter what is the protocol, we're going to deal with the data in the same way, and we're going to try to reuse every tool that we develop, so we are not trying to reinvent the wheel every time. So what EDI Framework is, I copied the the description because for me it was ideal. So a modular system that takes care of the user interface, configurations, and automatic of the EDI inbound and outbound of the electronic data interchange. So this module relies on queue jobs and components, which are also projects from the OCA, and benefits from them to manage calls, to manage data exchanges asynchronously. So as to say that the automated management of the states will ease our life when we are trying to process documents. So actionable stats for the inbounding process. When we need to fetch like invoices or orders, we have a lot of documents that maybe we need to enter to the system. We can receive those documents in many ways, for example, FTP folders, endpoints, or some custom integrations that the customer has. We have that action, which is called receive, that it's a component that will allow us to receive this information wherever the resource will be, and we will store this information in an exchange record, in a model, so then we can process it in Odoo. Once we receive, many times we can also add a check to see if the data is correct. For example, when we're dealing with SOP envelopes, we can check that the schema is the correct one before we enter this information in the system. As you can see down, we have different states that will allow us to stop the importing process if we have some issue. So for example, if we're receiving an FTP file and the schema is not properly set, we can set it to a validation error, and then we can have another operation that will figure out how to manage to move it to the next state, which will be receive. When when we already receive the documents, we need to process. We need to add these documents to the system. In that process, we can also have errors because we don't know never if the data is compatible with our system. But it's not a problem because at some point we will raise an error and we will wait somebody to fix it and import the record. Once we have processed the exchange, we have our new model, for example, it would be a sale order. We will have that in the shader. We will have the different history about the changes that took place there. In the other way, we can send documents to different parties, to external parties. So in order to do that, we are going to need to generate an exchange record to, after that, send it to those parties. So we will start from a model concept, so for example, an invoice, and then we have different trigger mechanisms that will allow us to push the data to see, okay, which is the status that needs to be this document to be pushed to the external system, or if we want to push it manually or we have a lot of plenty of different ways to push this data to the external party from the system to trigger that. Once we trigger the creation, we have an action which is called generate, which is responsible to fetching the data from the Odoo model and create the proper document format that will be sent to the third party. After that, we have generate. We could also have error on generating, and so on. We are going to send it to external parties, and then we just configure. We are not going to create a new module or new code to send it. We're always trying to reuse the information, to reuse the way that we exchange the data, and we're just doing that through configurations. So the framework concepts, there are a list of models that will allow us to create this automation. But these ones we will need to configure them properly, and they have a lot of options that we have. And the most important one is the exchange record that we talk. That is where we store this message, and we have define the backend, which is the way that the message is exchanged, and the exchange type, which is the classification and how we're going to process this message before we send it or we receive it. In this record, as you can see, we have this error that could happen, but you don't need to worry because some administrator will fix it, and it will be fine in a few hours. Let's talk about the backend, which is the configuration to other systems. So it's the way that the exchanges are going to be sent or received. Here we have several examples of the ways that we can exchange. For example, the number one, we are configuring an endpoint in our Odoo, and we're creating the exchange record when somebody calls this endpoint. The second one is one from an FTP server. We have 3 folders there. So when we are receiving to the pending folder, some action will be triggered there, and we'll try to fetch this document and put it in our system. If everything is all fine, it will move to the done folder, and if there is some error, we will put this file in the error folder, and we will know the third party that something was wrong there. The third example, it's a custom example. For example, we can extend the framework to work with the integration that we wanted. In this example, we were working with AWS. And the third one is an output. So we're sending through a web service. And in this case, we can have like a handle that we have here in the endpoint. And we have this definition, but we can send to several endpoints on that domain. The exchange type, which is the classification. So when we receive this message, the backend is responsible to say, okay, this message has been received from a folder. Okay, this message is from the type FTP. So I'm going to try to classify this message to see if I have a component that can process and can create a record or can add the information to our system. You will see that here we have a lot of examples, a lot of configuration that can granularly being set. For example, managing the job channel that will allow us to restrict the way that we're receiving the message and that we're going to process it. As well, we can have the advanced settings where we can define on-demand components and send in some context, and then we can modifying the configuration without adding new developments, perform a proper configuration to talk to other third-party systems. The components, which is the more technical model, it's not a model itself, it's a service class that is not linked to any SQS table that we can select in the runtime. So this means that we have a model. For example, we have a sale order, but we have several components that can process the sale order, and we can select on the runtime to say, okay, I'm going to process this order for that client with this component or for the other one. In the component, we're going to define, receive, we're going to define different components, which they are parameterized in the OCA module that will allow us to generate this outbound or this inbound process. For example, we're going to decide how we're going to receive the message, how we're going to process and send it to our system, or how we're going to generate it and send it to another party. As well, we have the component listener, which is a feature, technical feature that will be listening for the models to see if something happened, and this will trigger some actions that will allow us to configure, for example, sending events. Here you can see an example of a component. This component will be to send, to import orders. As you can see, we are extending from a regular component defined in the EDI OCA, and we are declaring an usage, as we say, to identify the component that we want to use with the exchange type. We can also, this is optional, but we can define the backend time and the exchange time, and then when the system is looking for the components, it will be easier to the system to fetch the components. So here we pass to the process. Usually we get the data, we process the data, we create the record, and then we write the link in the exchange for that record. For me, it was interesting to use the save point, because before doing that, at some point, when I was receiving some messages and there were some errors, there was like a partial creation of sale orders, sale order information or partner, and then it was a mess when we were trying to retry the process component. Then we have the exchange type rules, which is the triggers that will allow us manually to send data to external systems. We can define as a form button in any model, and we could define the domain, so when the button is going to appear, and we can define the snippet, which is a restriction if we want or don't want to send the exchange data. The available features that we have, as we mentioned, that there was a lot of reusability and pluggability. In this EDI repository, we have the integration with UBL, EDIFACT, FactorX, PDF, and XML, and there will be like helpers that will allow us to reuse it and don't recreate it every time. Apart from that, another interesting feature is the output templates that will allow us to define in Odoo itself how the message that we're going to send looks like, and we're using the QWeb that will allow us almost send any kind of messages, and the XML and JSON, which are the most typical. We also have feature for notification that will notify, for example, the IT department when there is some error with the exchange. We also have integrations that will identify the partners from the message in the EDI partner data, and we can also have some metadata to don't be all time consulting this file content, and we have the metadata which is easier to retrieve. So the key benefits of using the EDI framework is that we're reducing the manual data entry and errors. So as we are automating these exchanges, we will see that the errors that we will have will be caused by external parties or some misconfiguration in our systems, things that have changed. We have a unified user interface with a lot of configurations that will allow us to communicate with a lot of external providers. We have these helpers and features that will allow us to don't start from scratch every time that we need to implement a format that is already in the market. And yeah, most of them, they're tracking and monitoring, because we will have all the exchanges in the same place, and we can have like an overview that what is happening, which ones we have error. We can track the time that were received until it was processed, and then we can get some metrics. And we always have some point where we are keeping the messages, because many times when we are developing fast integrations, we're losing the way that where we're storing the data. If there is an error, and we cannot retrieve this data, and with this framework, this can be done. What is coming soon is nowadays the EDI OCA module. It's for somebody more complex. So in some developments, you don't want to add the queue job or the component when you are just planning to send some HTTP requests. So there is a couple of proposals about splitting the module in these 3 modules. And let's see how it works. But we were testing and working with the 3 of them. It's pretty much the same right now. So thank you for hearing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the interesting talk. What are you doing in cases where you have an enterprise customer wanting to do ordinary Factor X invoices, and then, if I'm not mistaken, the enterprise product has already the EDI and the Factor X, its own EDI and Factor X implementation. So do you substitute it by yours? Do you use the upstream one, or is there any means of combining those?
Thank you. We never faced this case before, but we are aware of the licensing. So in this case, we will need to start from scratch from the OCA, EDI OCA model, which is LGPL. So I'm not sure.
I'm not sure whether you got the question right. As far as I understood, if you want to create a Factor X invoice, you can either go standard enterprise, or you could use your EDI integration doing the job. So what in cases where you face this problem, are you going the standard way, or are you using your stack, even in cases where you only need to do this part of EDI?
It depends on the client. It depends.
Okay.
It depends if you have like more EDI integrations, and then you say, okay, I'm going to integrate everything together, or if it's a smaller case, which enterprise is solving it, why not using that if the customer is paying for that?
May I? I mean, the point is that the core is LGPL, so you can build any kind of exchange, even using the core, using enterprise, and it's up to you if you want to totally bypass the framework and just use the core, or if you want to keep the feature of having the unified UI, blah blah blah. Then what you can do is can be an hybrid thing. So you use the machinery. For instance, recently on 18 I totally discarded account invoice UBL, for instance, which is generating the UBL of the invoice in the community, and I reused core community still, the core model to generate UBL. So framework and just a little piece of core to generate, so it's still compliant. I mean, we don't have to maintain account invoice UBL because it generates the same exact output. Of course, if you have to do some customization, you will have to still hack a little bit how the core is built. There are few hooks, but not as much as you have in the OCA. But yeah, potentially you can build on top of enterprise as well.
For the sending EDI file, you have the output templates for QWeb and XML and JSON. But what about the receiving? Are we still have to write a mapping, or we have a generic way to define which from XML which data goes to which field?
Yeah, for receiving, I think that there is a feature that it is not done, so you need to work with some integration, some helper that already provides this receiving component, or create it yourself.
No, maybe I can answer another thing. Originally, the template machinery could handle that. The point is that it depends on what you have to process. So, for instance, if you have to process UBL or existing data formats that we have, the idea is that you define a process component that reuse that piece. So in the community, we already have processing of purchase order, processing of invoice, processing of many things, sale orders, for instance. So the idea is that it's been made modular, because then you can plug whatever you want to process that data. So you don't care where it comes from. You don't care the format. You just plug what you need. In case you want to map stuff, you will have to define your own thing, definitely.
I have a follow-up question. Maybe you showed us an example using the Shopee and AWS SQS backend together with Shopify, and that implies, at least to me, that you do the whole Shopify integration using EDI. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, so you do all so stock updates in one direction, orders from Shopify to Odoo in the other direction, even delivery notices maybe to the backend in Shopify again the other direction. So there's a multi-level integration, like process integration even.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we have several. The client have several stores in Shopify.
Yeah.
And then they decide to unify this with the SQS because there were an integration that were already done. So we were fetching we have the order importing and the transaction importing and all. But when for example, when the picking is done, we're also sending back to Shopify, and we're like leveraging the inventory levels with that.
And also the monetary transactions linked to an order, because usually you pay with any payment means like PayPal or Stripe or Aiden and in the Shopify front end. So you even transfer the transaction downwards to Odoo.
Yeah, because you need to. So you get the transaction received when they purchase the order, and then when you fulfill it, you also receive another transaction to capture the amount. Okay. So you need to have those integrations as well. All right. I mean, you could skip it, but or not skip it, but call directly the GraphSQL query. But the model was like this.
Makes no sense if you use that makes not too much sense if you have an SQS for replication, balancing, and all that kind of stuff in your architecture, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Any other question? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.